morning. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this first webinar in our 2025 Fall Sponsored Webinar Series. My name is Raina Dyer-Barr, and I serve as the Director of Community College Research and Engagement in the School of Education at the University of Pittsburgh. The University of Pittsburgh is the home of the Council for the Study of Community Colleges. Today's webinar is being presented by our 2025 CSCC Double Diamond sponsor, the Lumina Foundation. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I turn it over to our presenters. All mics have been muted, and I'll ask that you remain that way as this presentation is being recorded. You can unmute to participate in the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to today's presenters to introduce themselves and talk about their research.
Thank you, Raina. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Mullen, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about measuring value. I'm Chris Mullen. I'm Strategy Director for Data and Measurement at Lumina Foundation, and I'm joined by my colleague, Wendy Sedlak. Wendy?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's call. I'm Wendy Sedlak. I'm the Strategy Director for Research and Evaluation here at Lumina Foundation. And excuse me, I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about how we're thinking about the non-economic returns to the value of higher education.
All right, with that being said, I'm going to share my screen so we can walk through a PowerPoint. And then, as Raina said, we'll come back together. I will note that I'm having technological challenges with 3 screens, so you'll see my entire PowerPoint presentation here, because for some reason it's not letting me put it other places. And not even this, can I just hide that? So my apologies. There we go. All right, measuring value, envisioning a future of economic and non-economic notations of value. First, a little background setting. We are Lumina Foundation. For those of you who don't know, we're a private, independent, nonprofit foundation based out of Indianapolis. Our focus has been on making opportunities for learning beyond high school available to all. If you read the Chronicle of Philanthropy, there's an article this morning posted by our president, Jamie Marasotis, who reiterates our purpose and the decision we had to really be a foundation focused on a goal, a time-limited, quantifiable, numerical goal. Our focus on attainment really began in 2009. Lumina launched the bold goal for a better educated country. People became very aware of this goal. For those of you who may not know, and some of you might, but this is background information. At that time, only 1 state had an attainment goal. And over the years that followed, 49 states in total set an attainment goal and really focused their efforts, collective efforts, as we move forward. Lumina was fortunate to partner with other foundations, organizations, providers, researchers, policymakers, and analysts to really catalyze our work on attainment and really making sure that we shift from a system that's focused largely on access or choice. Access being something that was more aligned with the community college egalitarian notion of everybody should have opportunity to go to college. And choice at that time was a code word for selective institutions or going to institutions where you had to have some kind of criteria to be allowed. Both access and choice worked very well together for a long period of time. But really in the early 2000s, the conversation shifted to say we just need to make sure people aren't going just to college, but they're actually completing. I remember at that time I talked with a community college president who said they did a degree audit a credit audit of the students on their campus, and they found students walking around with like 200 and something credit hours with no credential. This wasn't a very, it was uniform by many people in the field at the time. There were still some individuals who, as always, have different points of view. Edmund Glaser, a longtime champion of the community college movement, head of AACC from 1958 to the 1970s, had a different opinion that our colleges should be like libraries where people just check out information. And so the shift in the attainment goal is really a focus on how do we have a change in the conversation and really trying to work to make sure, again, that people who enroll complete as costs were going up and the dynamics of higher education were different, but really is grounded in what the workforce needed. And so that was in 2009. We set a goal. And as we move forward to today, the data's lagged 2 years, so we don't know if we're going to meet the 60% goal. But as of the most recent data, which is for 2023, We know that 54.9% of adults in the United States have a post-secondary credential. And so we track and follow this goal and stay true to our mission and our purpose on a tool called Stronger Nation. And this Stronger Nation is free and available to all. You can Google Stronger Nation and it should pop up for you. And you can do things like search for United States or different states in particular. It shows from 2009 to 2023 what a 16.9 percentage point increase in our attainment rate, which is a great success. A part of that is that we started counting short-term credentials. As the data became available, we recognized that education beyond high school includes both degrees, but certificates and certifications, professional or industry ones, of value. And so we did a lot of work in that space, along with lots of partners, to try and elevate this notion that learning after high school is not simply just a bachelor's degree. This is the trend line. This is from the old version of Stronger Nation. We're redesigning Stronger Nation. It should be up and available this year on January 30th again, roughly. We're setting the final date and time, but mark your calendars. And we'll release the newest data when that comes. But you can see, again, this is a visual depiction of trends over time that you can see for the goal. So to understand where we were, we spent about a year and a half. Well, I say our board and our executive team, not me, but I was part, I ran some numbers, but our board and our leadership team really looked back to understand what we learned along the way, how we grew, what we knew, and where we needed to go in the future. And I think a really nice synopsis of that is in a colleague of mine, Courtney B. Francis. She wrote a Lumina blog on this that kind of outlined some of the major steps that were accomplished along the way by states. We are just a foundation. We are here to support colleges, state agencies, intermediary partners, universities, researchers, analysts, to really help us understand how to ensure a greater number and percentage of individuals have opportunity to be successful in college. And in so doing, we look backwards, it helped us to look forward. And so earlier this year, after much deliberation, Lumina Foundation set forward a brand new goal, because 2025 is now, again, 2-year data lag, but 2025 is now. So where are we going to go? And there's a lot of research. This is just one example of some of the research that was done over time and our constant efforts to engage members of the field, including many of you on this call and others. And if you look at the second item here from this Gallup Lumina State of Higher Education poll, it says 84% of current or prospective students cite at least one employment-related factor as why they're enrolled or considering pursuing a degree or credential. So we know, by and large, not for everybody, but by and large, people choose post-secondary education because they want an employment-related outcome. They want a job. They want to see it as a pathway to a better life, and they want all the values that come with it. That is not to say that the 16% who didn't select this doesn't bring value too. We'll get to that. But the overwhelming majority of respondents said that that was their reason to do so. And when we engaged conversations with other stakeholders in the field, we recognize that completing a credential is important and necessary, but not wholly sufficient. So our goal was an evolution from our attainment goal. And we evolved from completion to, oops, went too fast, from just attainment to something else. Other things we looked at is like, what are the jobs need, right? The 60% goal a long time ago was not something that, I wasn't around, but my understanding, they didn't sit around and pick a number out of the sky. They said, what does the economy really need? What does it need? What do we need to do for America to be competitive? And some economists and others set that 60% goal. And so we continue to look at that. We continue to think about what is best for our country, what is best for the people and the diverse fabric of individuals who make up our country, and how do we make sure we have a prosperous nation? So this study from Georgetown is just, again, one of many pieces of evidence and factors took into consideration. And you see in the future, there's projected really to be a growth in need of more individuals with post-high school credentials. The orange is a high school pathway. Right now, 13.8 million good jobs can be held by somebody with a high school pathway. That goes down to 13.2 million. Remember, population is changing, right? And growing. And the middle school's pathway certificate certifications, associate degrees goes from 16.2 to 16.4 million. And then they're projecting a real growth in bachelor's degrees. And this is the Georgetown Center by 2031. So information like this helped inform our thinking. We also looked at the distribution of jobs, so not just how many, but the distribution. Another way to look at was beforehand. And again, we see an increasing percentage of jobs needing post-secondary credentials of value, but these have to be good jobs, right? And not just any job. So there's a difference between just having a job and having a good job. And so we wrestled with that. And what we came up with was our new goal. And our new goal being by 2040, 75% of adults in the US labor force will have college degrees or other credentials of value, leading to economic prosperity. That's a lot to take in. There's a lot of nouns in there. Whenever I look at something, I always look at the nouns and the verbs. Verbs are what are you going to do, and nouns is who's going to be impacted. So 75% of adults, we classify that as people 25 to 64 in the US labor force. So this is a little bit different. We're going to talk about of a population of college degrees or other credentials of value. We're going to talk about that in a second, leading to economic prosperity. So when we compare and think about the differences between where Lumina was focused before and where we are focused now, a really important part is to think about what population, who's the denominator in this calculation. And on our website, we have a revamped methodology section, which I hope you find. It's in the upper right of the website. You'll find it right up here. Is a methodology part that talks about the measures. And this figure illustrates it hopefully clearly for all of you, which is when we looked at educational attainment, it was just the US working age population with a post-high school credential. So anybody 25 to 64. If you were working or not, it did not matter. We just identified those who were aged 25 to 64. With our credentials of value goal, our new goal, we're not ending attainment because we need for individuals to earn credentials in order to have a credential of value. What we're saying is those, and hopefully it's to a one-to-one match where those with a credential are actually credentials of value. And the denominator for how we talk about credentials of value are the share of the US labor force with a post-high school credential, and numerator, those earning a salary or wage 15% more than the national median for high school graduates. We can talk about this. We did not compare states to states. We compared individual states in the nation to a national median because it's a national goal. Happy to have that conversation when we get to Q&A. For a little bit more clarity for those who, because this is a research call and a lot of researchers are on the line here. We try and be as transparent as possible with all the data and what's and where we get it from and what it looks like. And so you can see the comparison between credentials of value, our new goal, and educational attainment. Again, the population is different. People who are working, looking for work, or in the military. So this population count is somewhat of a smaller denominator than the entire US resident population. At present, we can do nation and state. We're working on getting county and metro area data for the credentials of value work. Due to the timeline when the board ratified our goal and the time I had to work with our contractors to pull the data, we were unable to get county and metro area data. But for this new update, we're looking to add that in. So if you go to a Stronger Nation right now, you'll ask, where's the county and metro data? And that's important because oftentimes I get phone calls from a range of people, including those who work in particular counties and want to understand how their county can improve or how they compare to others. So our aspiration is to update that. The time scope for attainment was 2009 to 2023. Again, that will change with the new year of data. We added in a couple of years of data when we ran credentials of value so you can start to see some trends. And we also decided to break out age groups. Part of that is because as we learn, like you learn, that earnings change over time. And so this is a way for us to look at not only the 25 to 64-year-old population as we did in attainment, And we looked at 25 to 34 as a leading indicator. I will say when we started looking at attainment back in 2009-10, the 25 to 34-year-old attainment rate was below the 25 to 64-year-old attainment rate. And over time that changed. What does that mean? That means that colleges and universities across the country are doing a great job of graduating more students. It's a real testament to the partnerships we've had over time and the commitment that we've had collectively, not just Lumina, but other foundations, again, partners, stakeholders, legislators, governors, and other leaders, presidents, deans, departments, chairs, and faculty, to really focus on this idea of helping students not only enroll, but complete college. The age groups for the credentials of value, again, slightly different. Not only do we do to 25 to 64, we're also exploring smaller age group breakouts of 25 to 35, 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, and 55 to 64 to really understand how credentials of value might change over time. And then again, these are all the data sources we use. We work very hard only to use publicly available data sources. The degree data should be easily replicated. The short-term credential data, not so much. It's a calculation and estimate. And again, I can talk about efforts that many of us have been a part of and to really get better data on certificates and certifications and nationally representative sample surveys. I should say, group of researchers, we're all talking here, that this is really about, we use sample survey data. We don't use administrative data, aside from iPads when we pull it in. And so we are not tapping into SLDS systems. We're not tapping into the National Student Loan Data System. We're not tapping into the National Student Clearinghouse. We're using publicly available data sets that are free to everyone to the greatest extent possible. And then whenever we can, if you have questions, I'm always happy to hop on the phone with you and try and explain how we estimate short-term credentials to the best of my ability. Again, I'm not allowed to touch any data. I think the researcher and the audience can appreciate that. I have really thoughtful people who do this for a living. You don't really want me to touch the data. There's lots of questions you might have. We worked really hard to source FAQs from partners and individuals. If there's a question you have that you do not see in the FAQ section of our methodology page, please email it to me. I'm cmullen@luminafoundation.org. And we'll answer it and put it up here. Again, we're doing all we can to be as transparent and clear with everybody about where the data comes from and how we measure things. So that's just a source. So this is the website, what it looks like, our credentials of value webpage. If you go there, again, if you click on the upper right, so far we've talked about the educational attainment tab. We've talked about the methodology tab. And now this is the credentials of value tab. And you'll see we have an introduction, a summary. You can cut it by states, either going here or clicking a state from this dropdown. Education types, which are really the credential types, demographics, and detailed race ethnicity data as well. And here's what it looks like. Again, we're at 44.1%. So you can imagine our goal of going to 75% is about 30 percentage points away. It's a long way to go and a short time to get there. But we believe we can do it. And so we're working on making that a reality, because that's what our nation demands, and that's what we need to be competitive and successful. Notice it doesn't say 100%, right? So let's acknowledge. Sometimes I feel as though in my experience in the world that we see things as absolutes, and it's not absolutes. This is what we understand to be what's best, based upon our best intelligence today about what we need for the future. Here's our state goals again. You can see them shared across. Again, some information about methodology. And then there's a part of our goal about economic prosperity. We're going to spend the rest of our time here. I'm going to turn to my colleague Wendy shortly to talk about how we're thinking about economic prosperity. You know, we are initially measuring it as percent of the people with college degrees, certificates that earn at least 15% more than the national average. But we're also really spending this time now to think about and develop better ways to measure economic prosperity over time in ways that are publicly available and understandable. One way that we're thinking about doing that is measuring individual education benefit. We know that earning more is great, but if you're earning more and you still are having a hard time thriving in society, then that's a challenge. What do? We look through, these are just a snapshot of some books on my bookshelves, right? This idea of return on investment or value in higher education goes back a very, very long time. And reading all these books and pulling from the literature, there's one thing that holds true, and this was created by APLU actually in 2013, 2012. It's kind of like this ever-present value framework I'll share, right? It's this was a multi-organizational effort to really start talking about value as almost over a decade ago. And they fall kind of in 4 buckets. Economic or social capital, which is non-economic, or those are the rows, and the columns are public and personal, right? So when we think about the various ways to measure value, it appears over time, when we read through the literature and the various calculations that people have done, that they fall in one of these 4 buckets. And so right now, our goal sits clearly in the personal economic value of post-secondary, right? In this top right green bucket. That's where our goal currently sits. But what if we could measure it in these other buckets? Perhaps in a way that's free, nationally available, and replicable. There's a bunch of literature that researchers have done that make assumptions and different things about data sets or pull things, and it's really hard to replicate a lot of the work out there. Because they use a special data set or a unique accumulation of information to put an answer out there, or it's associative. So what we're doing is really starting to think about this more. Is there a way that we can systematize it where it's not so hard to identify, and we have just some basic descriptive statistics that help us fit in these 4 buckets? I know we're getting close to time. Education for what? Again, another way we think about it, we think about well-being, right, is one thing to think about. Are people better off and feeling better about the way they are? And you see that changes. Again, this is a survey of just a small number of people. It's a private survey. It's not public. But it informs our direction in the way that we think about things. So one project we have underway is called Measuring Individual Education Benefits. What I've done is created this is a project I'm leading. We've identified a managing partner who's leading the work. We have a measurement advisory panel who's contributing to the thought of the work over the next 2 years, 2025 and 2026. We're going to come up with some ideas about maybe ways to do it, and then test and retest to see if these measures actually work. So if, for example, if we do a survey item, do we test it and retest it so that the percentages are nearly the same, and so the question is worded correctly? So some of this is survey design work. And then in late 2026, we'll have some recommendations thinking about where it is we might want to go next in our next investment cycle. Lumina runs a 2-year investment cycle, so it'll be the 27-28 year, and we'll build upon what we learned this year in that work to say, okay, it's not just earnings, but maybe earnings and debt, or earnings and cost, or disposable income, or some other way to show that people with credentials are receiving some kind of financial benefit. And today we've talked a lot about finances. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the page to my colleague, Wendy, who's going to talk about non-economic returns. Wendy?
Thank you, Chris. Can you flip to the next slide? I don't know, maybe I have those permissions, but perfect. Thank you. And good to see everyone again. So Chris has talked a lot about sort of the focus on economic returns, and I want to talk just briefly about what we're thinking about more holistically in terms of non-economic returns. And so while Lumina is pretty staunchly focused right now, trying to think about what's going to be happening over the next 15 years, we want to be able to build from there as well. And so, as Chris mentioned and talked about, post-secondary attainment is often measured by economic outcomes like wages and employment. But economic measures alone don't capture sort of the full value of higher education. I know I'm on here with a bunch of researchers, all of whom I think have had their own post-secondary experiences. So to truly understand educational value, we must examine broader outcomes that impact individuals, community, and society. And so that's part of the work that we are seeding right now. And so it's a longer term plan and goal, but part of what we're doing at the outset here in 2025, as we just launched our new goal, is to think about some of the non-economic value components. And so some of those things, one of those is around sort of job preparedness and the relevance of skills. So you can stay on the first slide, yeah. But so a question is, does higher education equip students with adaptable, practical skills for evolving careers? There's another piece around sort of personal development and growth, right? And so that's questions about sort of how does education help shape critical thinking, identity, lifelong learning, all of which we talk about, in terms of the value of higher ed. There's questions about long-term career satisfaction. So beyond income, how are students finding meaningful and sort of fulfilling career paths? There's pieces around sort of civic engagement and community connection and cohesion. So does education help sort of prepare graduates to contribute to democratic life, to volunteerism, to social cohesion? And then finally, thinking about adaptability across contexts. So are graduates positioned to thrive, not just in work, but also in family and community and civic roles? So, high value education isn't just about earning a credential. It means, it's about gaining skills, it's about knowledge, it's about experiences that translate into career success, community engagement, community health, as well as personal fulfillment. So now you can turn to the next slide, Chris. So we've seeded some work already. So at the very end of 2024, we worked with a partner who held calls, it was about 26 organizations, a mix of sort of philanthropic organizations, nonprofit, federal entities, to talk about how they're thinking about this idea of value. So this is folks who are actively kind of thinking about this domain to understand, how folks are thinking about it, what components are they thinking about, are there definitions, where's sort of the emphasis. And what I can share from that is that in general, people don't think definitions of value should be only economic. Yet at this time, they essentially are. And so a lot of this, you've heard Chris talk about, having the data and available data and having it be publicly accessible. So that's been a challenge, is to have more easily sort of available data. There's a lack of agreement on sort of what to measure and how to measure it. There's conviction for some that jobs and economics drive, student decisions and needs and the like. So there's lots of questions out there. I'll also say that as a part of that work, another piece that was interesting is that, we were cautioned that if not careful, the focus on value could become polarizing by race and ethnicity. So we could ultimately inadvertently, through the work that we're doing, reinforce existing inequities. So something that we're thinking about and being really sort of mindful of as we're doing this work. And then I'll say a second, so that was kind of early 24 into 25, really helping us think through our own goal and not just what's happening in these first 5 years, but all the way, through to 2040 and how we want to think about things. So that was sort of a jumping off point. We also did a little bit of work recently under a grant that we had where we put out a call to folks globally to really think about looking at different ways to measure this and asking for folks to provide sort of reliable, regularly collected data sources around health and communities and crime. So again, to Chris's point, asking about data sources that must be nationally representative. They could be disaggregated at the state level, also within state, looking at towns and communities and or counties, and being able to look at educational levels. So really trying to understand more about sort of those public benefits for communities. So we had some work that's underway right now, where we're hearing back and trying to understand what are those data sets that we might be able to turn to be able to look at some of these questions that we have. Third, I'll say we've had some work that, again, we seeded over the last 2 years, and we'll be doing some more work moving forward with Urban Institute in particular, who was working with a set of 7 institutions and really trying to understand the benefits. This is specific to community colleges, and sort of the benefits of those having community colleges, and the benefits of having those within communities. And so looking at things like the economy and jobs and health and well-being and civic life and resilience. So we did a pilot effort, and some of my colleagues and I were involved in helping to fund that. And we have some work moving forward as well. And through that pilot effort, again, we're hearing different challenges that are arising for folks. And this is about, some of the participating institutions surface some key challenges around accessing and deploying data, crafting key messages, and closing funding and knowledge gaps. So we're going to be doing some more work with them specific to this same kind of focus area. And then finally, we're just launching some new work with the Harvard Graduate School of Education that's going to be a mixed methods project. It's really going to explore how students and professionals in high need fields. So this is looking at construction, architecture, sort of healthcare, and IT, and how ultimately both sort of students and professionals define the value of post-secondary credentials in non-economic terms. So there's this framework that they're drawing upon that's going to really examine how learners and professionals articulate meaning, purpose, and social contribution in relation to their education and to their work. And so a lot of this work, we're looking at both sort of quantitative measures as well as qualitative measures to help us sort of move beyond simply the economic returns to be more holistic in our focus, engaging multiple stakeholders, including policymakers, students, families, communities, and the like, so that eventually the hope is that we will be able to move beyond, just having sort of the square sort of economic focus and economic prosperity, and be more holistic, as we know that value is multidimensional in nature, and we want to be mindful of that and help to continue to sort of build out that work. So I think we have a bit of time now for any questions, and perhaps, I don't know, anything else you want to add, Chris?
No, I think that was great, Wendy. Thank you. I guess we'll open it up to people on the call. Raina, I'll defer to you.
Yes, any questions that anyone has, you can unmute or you can put it in the chat, whichever you prefer.
So I have to ask a question. With all of this stuff, and it appears that there's some challenges to the valuing of higher ed that's happening in the current administration, and the collection of data, and keeping of those data. With those sort of dual challenges, what do you kind of foresee in the coming years in terms of trying to sustain efforts to measure value, and how we're looking at that, and how do we persist among growing questions?
Yeah, Brett, that's the elephant in the room that has disrupted my entire investment strategy this year, for sure. And so thanks for acknowledging it and for speaking up as a teacher, so I can wait, the 7 seconds for somebody to answer a question. So here's our reality. Our federal data system is changing substantially in some cases. So there are challenges with that for certain, as you bring up. Data releases are being delayed. Some data collection is still going on, but maybe never be released, or it'll be 2 years before we get it. So this is something that myself and others are very actively monitoring, and to a point where it's I feel like we have an opportunity engaging in conversations to help shore up our federal data system and some state data collection efforts. Part of this is that there's also an opportunity as people think about and revisit what we currently collect and how we currently collect it. There's also an opportunity to shift and maybe change and add things which might not have been the case previously, right? And so there's always opportunity in a crisis. And so the question is, where are the windows that open, and where are the opportunities to help make our federal data collection better? That's the optimistic view. Also, to reinforce the importance of things like the American Community Survey, which is comes from the need to understand who our population is, which goes back to the founding of our country and our founding fathers and their vision for having a census in the first place. So there's a range of issues happening right now. One, I think, is a bucket of ensuring that key federal data continue. The second is to try and ensure that any changes that are happening to federal data systems really are helpful and not hurtful to the overall mission of what we're trying to achieve as a country. And three is, where are there opportunities to be additive to the conversation in particular. So those are kind of three ways I think about it at the moment, and recognize it's an exceptionally dynamic time right now. But I'll turn to my colleague Wendy if she has anything else to add to what I said.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Brett, and it's not an easy answer. So I'll just add a fourth component. I think, I know that all of you are involved in these types of conversations. We're involved with folks in the field and other funders in these conversations. And I think it's continuing to also, I feel about this broadly within the whole value of higher ed conversation, but really being able to show value in those federal data sets to policymakers and the like, right? So folks who represent communities, and continuing to share with them how this data is useful and how it helps serve them, how it helps to serve their constituents. Is the fourth point that I would add on as a way to help safeguard against the loss of further data. And also, to Chris's point, helping to highlight and shine a spotlight on opportunity for change and growth within these data collection instruments as well.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Well, with that, I want to thank you again for joining today's webinar. And thank you to Lumina Foundation and Chris and Wendy for sharing this work with us. Just a quick note, the call for proposals for the 2026 CSCC conference will be released today. So check out, be on the lookout for that through our newsletter and on our website. The 2026 conference will be in Salt Lake City, April 2nd through 4th, 2026. We hope that you'll submit conference proposals and help us spread the word, and that we'll see you in Salt Lake City in the spring. So thank you all again, and until next time.